Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been living in Hawaii for the past 15 years. My small house was functional, but nothing special. And between the mortgage and the homeowners association fees, I was barely breaking even most months. So when my elderly neighbors approached me last year with their proposal, it seemed like the opportunity of a lifetime. They were this amazing couple in their 80s who still had more energy than people half their age. They'd been talking about taking an extended trip around the world, something they'd always dreamed of doing while they were still healthy enough to enjoy it. Their house was gorgeous, much nicer than mine, with a view of the ocean and a spacious yard. The rent they were asking was reasonable, especially considering the property. It seemed like a win for everyone involved. But I'm not the kind of person who jumps into things without thinking them through. I've been burned before by informal agreements that fell apart, leaving me scrambling. So when we sat down to discuss the contract in October 2023, I read through every single line carefully. That's when I spotted the termination clause. Either party could end the agreement with just 30 days notice. My stomach dropped when I read that. 30 days wasn't nearly enough time to find housing in Hawaii, not in this market. I knew I had to say something. The husband noticed me frowning at the paperwork and asked if something was wrong. I told them I needed to be honest about my concerns with the termination clause. I explained that if I was going to do this, I couldn't risk suddenly becoming homeless with only a month to find a new place. The wife said they hadn't thought about that from my perspective. I went on to explain that I'd need to leave my own house, maybe even sell it to make this work financially, and I couldn't take that risk without some security. The husband said he completely understood my concern and offered to change the clause to say, unless mutually agreeable. I told them that sounded perfect and thanked them for being so understanding. The wife said, of course, that they wanted this to work out for everyone and they seemed so genuine about it. We all initialed the change right there on the contract, and I felt good about the decision. The agreement would run until November 2026, giving me almost 3 years of stable housing at a great price. Over the next few months, I prepared for the move. I spent weeks packing, sorting through 15 years of accumulated belongings. I even started seriously considering selling my house. After crunching the numbers with my accountant, it made sense. Why pay a mortgage and association fees on a house I wouldn't be living in for 3 years? The housing market was decent, and I could use the money to invest or save for my next place. By the time I moved into their house in early 2024, I was fully committed. I sold my house in March, feeling relieved to have that financial burden lifted. The money from the sale went into a special account for a property exchange I was working on, a complicated deal that would take time to finalize but would set me up nicely for the future. I settled in quickly. The house was everything I'd hoped for. I set up my office in the spare bedroom, unpacked my things, and even started making small improvements with the couple's permission. They checked in occasionally through video calls from whatever exotic location they were visiting. Everything seemed perfect. Then last month, my phone rang while I was in the middle of a client project. It was them calling from somewhere in Europe based on the time difference. The husband asked how I was settling in. I told him everything was great and that I was really enjoying the house. He said that was wonderful to hear, then told me there was something they needed to discuss. They decided they wanted to move back home. My hands went cold. I asked when they were thinking about coming back. The wife said as soon as possible because they missed their home. I reminded them about our contract and that we'd agreed I'd be here until November 2026. The husband acknowledged that but said circumstances change and they thought I'd understand. I told them I did understand, but this put me in a very difficult position since I'd just sold my house. The wife suggested that surely I could find somewhere else to live. I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. These were the same people who'd sat with me, who'd understood my concerns, who'd agreed to change the contract specifically to prevent this exact situation. I explained that it wasn't that simple, that the housing market in Hawaii was tough, and that I was in the middle of a time-sensitive property exchange. I told them I couldn't just drop everything and move out. The husband said they needed their house back and that I'd have to figure something out. The conversation ended shortly after, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Over the next few days, they called several more times, each conversation more frustrating than the last. They kept acting like I was being unreasonable for wanting to stick to our agreement. The wife said they really wanted to come home and asked if I couldn't stay with friends for a while. I pointed out that we were talking about 3 years, not a few weeks, and that wasn't realistic. I also asked what I was supposed to do with all my belongings. The husband said I was making this very difficult, and that they thought I'd be more understanding. I spent a sleepless week trying to figure out what to do. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in tenant rights. She told me that Hawaii law was strongly on my side, that I had an ironclad contract with a clear modification that both parties had signed. She said if I wanted to fight this, I'd almost certainly win, but the thought of dragging my elderly neighbors through court made me sick. These were people I'd considered friends. Still, I couldn't just roll over and let them make me homeless. I decided to try one more face-to-face conversation. I invited them over for coffee, hoping that sitting down together might help them see reason. When they arrived, I had all my documentation ready, not to threaten them, but to show them exactly what we'd agreed to. I told them I was glad they could come over and that we needed to talk about this situation. The husband immediately asked when I could move out. I clarified that wasn't what I meant, that we needed to find a compromise because I couldn't just leave. The wife insisted it was their house, and they should be able to come back whenever they wanted. I acknowledged that I understood it was their house, but reminded them we had a legally binding agreement. I pointed out that they had approached me and that I'd only agreed to this because they'd assured me I'd have a stable living situation for 3 years. The husband said things change, and they decided they wanted to come home. I told them I got that, but they couldn't just change their minds and expect me to become homeless. I said that wasn't fair, and it wasn't what we'd agreed to. The wife insisted they weren't trying to make me homeless, they just wanted their house back. I asked where I was supposed to go. I reminded them I'd sold my house because of our agreement, and that I was in the middle of a property exchange. I told them I couldn't just snap my fingers and find a new place to live. The conversation went in circles for what felt like hours. They genuinely seemed to believe that I was being difficult, that finding a new place to live should be simple. I started to wonder if they'd forgotten our original conversations or if they'd never really understood the implications of what they were asking. I told them I'd been nothing but accommodating, that I'd taken great care of their home, paid rent on time every month, and respected our agreement. I asked why they couldn't do the same. The husband said there was no need to get upset. I apologized but said I thought I had every right to be upset. I pointed out that they were asking me to upend my entire life because they'd changed their minds about an agreement we'd all signed. The wife said they didn't think it would be such a big deal. I repeated that it was a big deal because I'd sold my house and was in the middle of a major financial transaction. I took a breath and tried to reset the conversation. Getting angry wasn't helping anyone. I told them I didn't want to fight with them, that they were my neighbors, and I respected them. But I needed them to understand that I couldn't just move out. Not only would it be incredibly difficult for me, but it would also be a breach of our contract. The husband asked if I was threatening legal action. I said no, that I wasn't threatening anything, just stating facts. I reminded them we had a legally binding agreement, that I'd upheld my end of it, and I expected them to do the same. The wife asked what would happen if they really needed to come back, if there was an emergency. I told them that if there was a genuine emergency or health issue, of course we could discuss it. But I pointed out that wasn't the case, that they'd been traveling to 4 different continents since I moved in and seemed to be in great health. The husband agreed they were in good health, thank God, but said they missed their home. I acknowledged that I understood that, but said missing their home wasn't a reason to break a legal agreement and potentially make someone homeless. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then an idea came to me. I proposed a compromise. I said I knew they wanted to come back and that I didn't want to keep them from their home forever. I suggested that maybe we could agree that I'd move out earlier than originally planned, but not immediately. Perhaps in a year instead of 2.5. The couple looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that only people married for decades can have. The wife said a year was still a long time. I pointed out it was a year less than we'd agreed to. I explained it would give me time to finish my property exchange and find a new place to live, and it would give them a definite date to plan their return. The husband said they'd have to think about it. I asked them to please think about it and told them I really wanted to find a solution that worked for all of us. They left without committing to anything, and I spent the next week in limbo, not knowing if I should start packing or prepare for a legal battle. Then finally the husband called. He said they'd thought about my proposal. I asked what they'd decided. He told me they decided to accept it and that I could stay for another year. The relief was overwhelming. I thanked them and said I really appreciated their understanding. The wife apologized for causing me so much stress and said they didn't realize how complicated my situation was. I told them I understood and that I was just glad we could find a solution. The husband said they'd draw up an amendment to our contract to reflect this new agreement. I told them that sounded perfect and thanked them again. With a new timeline established, I could breathe again. I had a year to wrap up my property exchange, find a new place, and plan my next move properly. It wasn't what we'd originally agreed to, but it was better than being forced out with nowhere to go. The couple and I maintained a polite relationship after that. They even sent me listings occasionally when they came across something that might work for me. By the time moving day arrived, I'd found a decent place and completed my property transaction. We parted on good terms, though I'd never make the mistake of relying so heavily on someone else's property again. It was supposed to be a normal Saturday. My mom decided we needed to do some shopping, so we packed up my baby sister and headed to the mall. I was excited because I love spending time with my sister. She's only 4 months old, but she's already the light of my life. We'd been at the mall for about an hour when Mom remembered she needed to pick up something from a store on the other side. She asked if I could watch my sister while she ran over there real quick. Of course, I said yes. I'm 17. I can handle looking after a baby for a few minutes. So there I was, pushing the stroller around, cooing at my sister, and making silly faces to keep her entertained. That's when I noticed this woman giving me weird looks. At first, I tried to ignore her, but she kept staring and whispering to her kid. I started to feel uncomfortable, so I decided to head towards where Mom went. But before I could get very far, the woman stepped right in front of the stroller, blocking my path. She asked me where I thought I was going with that baby. I told her I was just waiting for my mom and she'd be back in a minute. The woman said I was lying and there was no way this was my sister. I was shocked. Who did this lady think she was? I said that, of course, she was my sister and asked her to move so I could go. She refused and said she wasn't letting me leave with a kidnapped child. Was this really happening? I told her I didn't know what her problem was, but this was my sister. Our mom just went to another store for a minute. I asked her again to let me pass. She kept saying I was lying. She said I was white and that baby was clearly black, so I must have stolen her. She wasn't going to let me get away with this. Just because we have different skin colors doesn't mean we can't be related. I asked if she was serious and if she'd ever heard of mixed families. I explained that our mom is black and our dad is white, then told her to move. I tried to push past her, but she grabbed the stroller handle. She repeated that I wasn't going anywhere and said she was calling security. By this point, I was starting to panic. I looked around, hoping to see my mom or maybe a store employee who could help. But the woman's yelling was drawing a crowd, and everyone was just staring. I yelled at her to let go of the stroller and told her she had no right to do this. She said she had every right to stop a kidnapper and shouted for someone to call the police. This was really happening. I started yelling back, trying to make someone understand. I screamed that I wasn't a kidnapper and this was my sister. I begged someone to help me. The woman's kid was crying now, adding to the chaos. I was so focused on protecting my sister that I didn't see the punch coming. Pain exploded across my face as the woman's fist connected with my nose. I stumbled back, stunned. Blood started pouring from my nose and my eyes watered from the pain. In that moment of shock, the woman grabbed the stroller and took off running. It took me a second to process what had just happened. Then panic set in. This crazy lady had just taken my baby sister. I screamed for help and yelled that she took my sister. I begged someone to stop her. I started running after her, blood still streaming down my face. People were staring, but no one was doing anything to help. I was screaming and crying, begging someone to stop her. I kept yelling that she was kidnapping my sister and pleaded for somebody to help us. 2 security guards ran towards us. They managed to cut off the woman's escape route. She tried to dodge around them, but one guard grabbed the stroller while the other restrained her. The woman demanded they let her go and said she was trying to save this baby from a kidnapper. The first security guard told her to calm down and said they needed to sort this out. I told them she attacked me and took my sister. I begged them to give her back to me. I reached for the stroller, but the guard pulled it away. The second security guard told me to hold on and said they needed to figure out what was going on. I was about to argue when I heard a familiar voice. My mom demanded to know what the hell was going on and yelled at them to get their hands off her children. I've never been so relieved to see my mom. She pushed through the crowd and ran to me, her eyes wide with concern when she saw my bloody face. She asked what happened to me. Before I could answer, the woman started shrieking again. She asked my mom if she was the mother and demanded to know how she dared let her son kidnap an innocent black baby. My mom asked her to excuse her and said that innocent black baby was her daughter, then called her an ignorant racist. The woman's jaw dropped. She looked from my mom to me, then to my sister in the stroller. She stammered that I was white. My mom agreed and said she was black. She said it's called genetics. Then she demanded to know who the hell this woman thought she was putting her hands on her son and trying to take her baby. The woman started sputtering, trying to come up with an explanation, but my mom wasn't having it. With a scream of rage, she lunged at the woman. The security guards tried to intervene, but they weren't fast enough. Mom's nails raked across the woman's face, leaving bright red scratches. The first security guard told my mom she needed to calm down. Mom ignored him. She pushed past the guards and snatched my sister out of the stroller, cradling her close. My sister had started crying from all the commotion. My mom soothed her and told her it was okay, and mommy was here. She said she was safe now. She turned back to the woman, who was now being restrained by both guards. My mom warned the woman that if she ever came near her children again, she'd do a lot worse than scratch her face. By this point, someone had called the police and an ambulance. We could hear sirens approaching. The woman was still yelling and trying to justify her actions. She said she was just trying to help and said my mom couldn't blame her for being suspicious. My mom told her she absolutely could blame her. She said the woman attacked her son and tried to kidnap her daughter because she was too ignorant to understand that families can look different. The police arrived a few minutes later. They took statements from everyone involved, while paramedics checked out my nose. It wasn't broken, just badly bruised. When the cops were putting handcuffs on the woman, she started freaking out. She yelled that they couldn't arrest her and said she was a hero. She claimed she was saving that baby from white trash kidnappers. She tried to pull away from the officers, kicking and screaming as they led her to the patrol car. Her poor kid was left standing there crying until another officer took him aside to wait for a relative to pick him up. Once things calmed down a bit, my mom pulled me into a hug, being careful of my sore nose. She apologized and said she was so sorry this happened to me. She asked if I was okay. I told her I thought so and that I was just shaken up. I asked if my sister was all right. My mom said she was fine and probably wondering what all the fuss was about. We both laughed a little at that, the tension starting to ease. One of the officers came over to talk to us. He said they were going to need us both to come down to the station to give formal statements. He explained the woman was being charged with assault, attempted kidnapping, and resisting arrest. My mom said good and that she wanted to press charges to the fullest extent. She said the woman needed to learn she couldn't treat people like this. The rest of the day was spent at the police station, giving statements and filling out paperwork. When we finally got home that night, I was exhausted. But when I watched my mom put my sister to bed, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness. No matter what anyone thinks or says, she's my sister, and I'll always be there to look out for her, just like I did today. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.